Okay, good evening everyone. Chapter number 4, Economic Survey, we will be picking up from where we left in the previous class. So, this chapter is very specific in terms of its utility for. Is it visible, everyone? Uh, so, the utility of this chapter specifically for prelims, because we'll be dealing with prelims only, right? I'll be explaining the context, but from prelim standpoint, there are three broad areas that I want you to focus on. When you're talking about the external sector, there is a concept called balance of payments. Okay. You have to know what are the components of this balance of payments. So this is the point number 1 that you have to know. Balance of payments and its components. Usually, when you look at the previous year questions in this topic, the components and how they interact will be the first set of questions that you will be getting. Second, within the balance of payments, you will see specific sector related problems. Say for example, if you're talking about either the exports or imports part, what are the major export commodities? What are the major import commodities? Largely, if you look at it from an import standpoint, because we have a current account deficit, we discussed what current account deficit is. We discussed what are the major contributors for this current account deficit in the previous chapters. But specifically in this chapter, we will be discussing those specific sectors and we will see how it will pan out. So, when you're talking about balance of payments, what does it indicate? When you are having two parties for a transaction, the trade between people who are outside our country and whatever is coming in and whatever is going out should balance out, right? Basically, this is what it is. If you see the accounting of this, you will see broadly what are the two subheadings that you can put? Current account and capital account. Why are these called current account and capital account? So, did you ever question why they are called current account and capital account? What are capital account components? Loans. Okay. What else? What do you mean by loans here? Yeah. Like we were discussing, what are the components? Then investment. Thirdly, that will come under this banking capital. Why are we talking about this component in balance of payments? When you're talking about money flow, money will flow either for an anticipation of a future return or for present expenditure. Either it will flow in or flow out, either for present expenditure or investment purpose. Whenever money flows for investment purpose, you will put it in the capital part. Whenever money is documented, the flow of money is documented for current expenses, it is put in the current aspect. Okay? Present year expenditure, future growth potential. This is how you have to look at the balance of payments part. What are the components? In the current account, what are the components? These are basics. Visible part, invisible part. Okay, let's put invisible and visible. Now, what are the parts that are there in this? Yes? Goods and services. Okay. What are the invisible part here? Like, what are we talking about in the invisible part? One second. Yeah. In the invisible part, what are we talking about? Transfer payments, income, transfers. Sorry, transfers is also services. Then what do you mean by visible? Merchandise, goods. You know the basics, this basics, right? All these basics I'm not going to explain once again. So this present chapter is nothing but an account of how these balance of payments components are trending, either increasing, decreasing, change in the structure. You are looking at the statistics and thereby looking at the trends therein. Okay. So before every chapter, they will give you a pretext. I want you to have a look at the pretext here. I will read it slowly so that you will note down the keywords that you have to use for your mains exam also. Now, we will be looking at the trends aspect for prelims, but the first part will be for mains. Generally, every year, the keywords that you will find in this external sector chapter will become important for your international relations also. In international relations, whenever you are writing answers, always there will be a economic component, right? The trade component of international relations. In GS2 IR part, whenever you are writing the economic aspects, the keywords that you see in this chapter will become important. So let us see what those keywords are slowly. And let me explain the meaning of those keywords. But before we start this, let's go back to the introduction, the overview chapter. When we were discussing this, we talked about the global uncertainty, which is a recurring theme in every chapter till now. What is this global uncertainty? Whenever you are looking at any relation of international relations, if you are looking at the trend in the politics, geopolitics, economics was rarely used as a tool because everybody wanted to use globalization. But that aspect is now changing, and a lot of demographic studies point that increase in the population, the pressure on local economies is the reason for this kind of deglobalization. Simply put, when population is increasing, when outsiders are coming, take the case of US. Why did the entire narrative of America First or MAGA, Make America Great Again, the campaign which led to the election of the present president, Donald Trump, why did it become successful? Because of this lack of jobs only. And secondly, there is an inequality. The rich folks are getting richer and the wage of the working class, the growth rate has remained stagnant. Let's say, for example, if there is a company X which earned like $1 billion, just for an example, do you think it will pass on that benefits to the salaried class? No, because it will distort the market. So this distortion has historically led us to use only the globalization as a tool for negotiations. But now the gap is narrowing down. So there is a trend of deglobalization. This is the context. Now let's read each of those lines slowly. Only this one paragraph will give you a lot of insights. Very important. India's external sector has evolved amidst global environment characterized by heightened trade policy uncertainty. I want you to use the specific keywords. Heightened trade policy uncertainty. You can communicate the idea in n number of words, but to be able to compress this complexity, I want you to use the same keywords. Heightened trade policy uncertainty, geopolitical realignments, and a structural shift away from hyper globalization phase. Notice this word structural. So, when Donald Trump came to power the first time, people thought that his entire presidency would be just a phase in international relations. You won't see a situation where this distorted trade regime, where you are imposing tariffs, will be a permanent shift. There was a trend of deglobalization. Let's say, for example, saying that I'll build a wall to stop migrants. That's not how it works, right? But that entire narrative repeated as patterns across the world. Wherever you see conservative elements taking over the political narrative, they were winning the elections. The right-wingers, as they call it, the conservatives, whatever is the idea of conservative political ideology in those respective countries, that trend is rising. The so-called rights-based regime or liberal regimes across the world are coming down. The latest addition to this is Bangladesh. This present leader of the state of Bangladesh previously struggled to even gain even regional authority. How do you explain the rise in this? Like, of course, there are some allegations of electoral fraud, etc. But how is that you see a pattern emerging across the world? Because the existing political structure dominated by globalization was not catering to the inequality problem. People are voting to the conservative elements in a hope. So, if you notice the shift across Europe, across US, South America, North America, Asia, this is the true paradigm shift. And therefore, economic survey says that this is not a phase. It is a structural shift permanently. Very important implication. When you say this phase of globalization, till now we were calling it a phase, now it is a truth, the new normal after COVID. What will be the implication? You no longer can depend on the principle that money will flow towards efficient firms. No, money will flow towards geopolitical allies. There is a discussion on these lines in economic survey. We'll get back to that. There are certain terms. Friendshoring, nearshoring. What are those terminologies? Let me explain that. But this is the meaning of the word structural shift away from hyper globalization phase. This is important. For this year, it is extremely important. I would want you to use these words in GS2 IR, GS1, impact of globalization. Like there is a new possibility of this question. In GS1 Indian society, till now the syllabus is impact of globalization. If you are saying this is a structural shift, don't you think the Indian society will also change? So, impact of deglobalization can also be asked on Indian society in the same lines. So, for that reason also it is important. The reconfiguration of global trade and investment flows. In the previous chapter, when we were dealing with money, we saw the necessity of consolidating household savings, because from now on, it will be difficult for India to expect investment flows just like how it was previously. We will still have investments because we are the largest largest market and also youngest market. Officially, we will be the most populous country in the world after the census. So, no international firm will want to lose out on this market. That is the context. Next, increasingly influenced by considerations of national security, technological sovereignty, and strategic autonomy. Please note down these keywords. This is for your mains. I understand you're all in prelims mode, but for this one chapter, please note down these keywords. The reconfiguration of global trade and investment flows increasingly influenced by the considerations of national security, technological sovereignty, and strategic autonomy. Analyze the conditions for the present phase of deglobalization across the world. These three keywords can be used as subheadings and explained. National security, technological sovereignty, and strategic autonomy. Every year, you will get questions for mains part from economic survey. This year, this chapter and this intro becomes extremely important. All the more, if you have PSI or optional, there is one aspect of factors that will influence, political negotiations, the current affairs aspect. Nobody would use the economic survey in PSIR. If you do so, you will have one additional advantage. You combine it with the theories, the political thinkers, but also add these key dimensions through the lens of those political thinkers. It will be helpful in that way also. Okay. Now, it introduced new constraints and opportunities for emerging economies. So, the gist is, we have less opportunities and challenges will be high in short term. That's why we have to recognize the fact that this is a structural shift. So the maneuvering scope will be very less for Indian government, not just Indian government, any emerging economy. On one hand, we have right-wing governments across the world. They don't want to put globalization on a higher pedestal without addressing the local politics. So this can also create internal security issues for India, given the fact that we are now surrounded by hostile neighbors. On the top of it, you also have AI. On the top of it, you have protectionism with our protectionism from our major trading partners. So situation is very tight. That's why to describe this, you will have to use these keywords. That's the reason I'm emphasizing again and again. Now take a look at this. In this changing environment, India's external performance demonstrates resilience to global shock. Now, what do you mean by resilience? How will you say our economy is resilient? What are the metrics? Okay, let me put it this way. You look at a boxer in a boxing ring. Both the boxers are equally, ferocious and they're fighting. So, between those two, one of the person is considered to be weak. And time and again, that boxer is taking all the punches. What is the expectation? We all would look at that person and say, maybe this person will be knocked out. And yet, that person is standing, taking all the blows without flinching and without stepping down. The condition or the adjective that you can use at that point of time to describe that person is resilience. Like you are not giving up. You are not showing the signs of weakness. So, if Indian economy is supposed to be described as a resilient economy from a trade standpoint, what would be the metrics? This is the question you should be thinking. So, it is not important to say Indian economy is resilient. What is more important is using the right kind of statistics from economic survey and the right metrics to show this is why Indian economy is resilient. So, if you are talking about resilience, you should know the shocks. Like what are the punches? If Indian economy is like that proverbial boxer that we were discussing, what are the punches that we were facing? We discussed this time and again. You have global protectionism, then you have tariffs, then you have climate change, then you have AI, then you have our own problems, internal security challenges, lack of enough investments in social capital, namely health and education. There is a need for reconfiguring our skills ecosystem. So many problems, and yet we were delivering the numbers. This chapter is trying to explain how we were able to do that. So, despite all these challenges, if you are showing up the numbers, on one hand, you can either say the data is wrong, but this time we can't say that because even IMF will be interested in looking at it. Or two, we have to understand that despite all these challenges, growth is coming from sectors which were unexplored previously. The second scenario is much more likely. Let's see what those unexplored areas are. Okay? Great. Now, in the first aspect, when you're talking about the introduction, here you will see the rise of global value chains being replaced by global value chains. They are reconfigured, not replaced, reconfigured on the basis of geopolitics instead of efficiency. Now, let me take a step back and explain what global value chain is. Let's say there is this, there's a phone, iPhone, for example. The design is made somewhere in California. Manufacturing is done, a part of it is done in China. But the Chinese manufacturer, like say for example, they set up a factory in Foxconn factory in China somewhere. But the subparts, some parts will be coming from Taiwan, some will be coming from elsewhere. They will assemble all of that together and ship it. The cost of producing that iPhone, including the cost of logistics, will still be less than manufacturing it in US. And this was possible because of globalization. That's why the term global value chain. India's problem was that instead of focusing on becoming a high value player in this global value chain, we were stuck at the lower end of the spectrum. Let's say if India were to earn money, do you think we should have Foxconn or focus on supplying raw material or small parts to Foxconn? We should have the Foxconn in this case of iPhone example. But for a very long time, we were not even supplying the small parts. We were just focused on extracting raw materials, dumping it in the countries which were producing this. So when you hear the word lower end of the spectrum of value chain, this is what they mean. We were getting peanuts because we did not have the skill set to utilize those resources. This is the concept of global value chain. In the last 1 decade, things have changed. There are certain policies which were taken which transformed how India would be working. For example, there is this scheme called the PLI scheme. Are you aware of what this scheme is? Production linked incentives. As the word itself suggests, production linked incentives, if you are producing something in our country, there will be an incentive for that manufacturer. Why are we doing this? Can you tell me the logic? Before even we speak of integrating within the supply chains, which is of course right, we want our part, like our manufacturing sector to be a part of the global value chains. But before that, we have to cater to our domestic industry. In the context of balance of payments, if you take a look at the balance of payments, here merchandise exports and imports, we were talking about this GDP formula. What is GDP formula? So this external sector chapter is majorly dealing with this X minus M. Problem with Indian export sector and import sector, like Indian trade, is that we are running a deficit. We are importing more as a matter of value. We are importing more than we are exporting. So this current account deficit means we are always subject to external shocks. So most of our imports were from oil. Next, what is the order? Okay, forget the order. At least tell me what are the 4 major areas you have to know for imports. Oil, edible oil, gold, what else? Any idea? Okay, let's take a guess. Did gold import increase or decrease? Take a guess. Last year prices were rising. So in this context, gold import will increase or decrease? Actually it should. When prices are increasing, import should decrease. But what happened? It surged by 38% compared to the previous times. Why is this happening? Across the world, gold is used as hedging, that is risk. Like if you want to reduce your risk, you will invest in gold. In times of global uncertainty, you will see hedging. So anyway, in these 3 components, namely crude oil, gold and edible oils, we did not have the capacity. So we will have to depend on someone else. And after that, there are some miscellaneous components. Let's say, for example, raw materials for sending the jewelry back again. Finished jewelry is one sector which is a very high value commodity for our exports. But we will be importing raw materials for that, like say diamonds, etc. Capital goods, for example, we will be importing from China. That is also one miscellaneous category. Okay. So this basket essentially should change. Import basket. If we have to reduce our bills, we have to move away from this basket of imports, namely crude oil, gold and edible oil. So what is the solution proposed by the government? Crude oil, can we do anything right now? Not much. But can we reduce? Is there any policy that you can think which is trying to reduce the amount of crude oil we are ethanol blending? Perfect. How much? So it has a dual benefit, namely reduction of pollutants and secondly current account deficit. Second component, edible oils. How much % of our edible oils is imported roughly? 45 to 50% roughly. 45 to 55% depending on the season. That's a huge bill. In a country which boasts of having many agroeconomic zones, don't you think it's a problem that we are unable to produce our own oil seeds? So what is the solution that this government proposed? National Mission on Edible Oils and especially palm oil. Which regions were considered? Andaman and Nicobar as well as Northeast. Okay, fine. So we are doing whatever we can to reduce our import bill. That is one trend that you have to focus on. This chapter will have trend based questions. That is the reason I am clearly highlighting this. Economic survey in the intro said that this is a permanent structural shift in our trade. So to quantify this and to justify our claims, we will have to use some data pointers. These two are the data pointers: Trade Policy Uncertainty Index and Global Economic Policy Uncertainty Index. So if you take a look at how these metrics are changing, they are reaching at an all-time high. Almost 1100% surge was there in policy uncertainty. We spoke about it, right? The trade rates were changed so many times until recently when the Supreme Court of US said that this is not legal to change the policy rates like this, like the tariff rates like this. It's very discriminatory. You can't do that. So that is what even survey is saying. Index peaked in April 2025, driven by three converging factors. Now, for this three converging factors, this point 4.2 will be important for your assertion reasoning. Assertion reasoning based questions can come. They give three reasons. What are they? Weakening of regional and multilateral trade agreements that had previously provided stability. Can you name one in the case of India? Yes. We have been a part of many multilateral groups. In fact, you got mains questions on these points also. BIMSTEC, it's not a trade agreement. BIMSTEC, for example, SARC, whatever economic discussions we've had in those regional forums, they didn't take off. They were supposed to give stability. Okay? Those were not working. This is the context of India, but the same trend has been occurring across the world. For example, Brexit. Britain came out of the EU. That's one more example. Second, countries' pursuit of sovereign interests through industrial policies. This part was hitherto not a trend in globalization. Now that is happening. And third, intensifying competition for rare earth minerals. What are rare earth minerals, guys? Any idea? Okay, how many rare earth minerals are there? 17. Okay, slight detour because this can also be a prelims question. I'll give you some mineral categories because this is a high yielding area, mines and minerals, and the associated current affairs. I'll slightly take a detour because this is very important in this context. I'll ask you some questions. I want you to tell me. Can you tell me the difference between critical minerals, next rare earths, atomic minerals as per our act, then you have beach sand minerals. In this context, there is a recent amendment to the Mines and Minerals Act of 1957. How many of you are aware of this? Are you aware of this? Okay. But before we get to that governance part, let us get some clarity on what are critical minerals. What is critical about critical minerals? It signifies the importance. Importance where? Economics, of course, every minerals is about economics, but economic importance only. But what about them? There is this larger goal of energy transition coupled with the new wave of technology, IR 4.0, which is basically AI, Web 3.0, for which you require semiconductors. So any mineral that is useful in this energy transition story or the IR 4.0 story has been categorized as critical minerals. Technically speaking, if we were to talk about them from an Indian standpoint, you have National Mission on Critical Minerals. There is this ministry, Mines and Minerals Ministry, which came up with a set of 30 minerals which are considered to be critical. I'm not expecting you to memorize those 30 minerals. But if you have to remember at least a few, I will ask you to remember the exceptions based on the current affairs. Okay. Here is where you will know the importance of rare earths and critical minerals. Also atomic minerals. What is the category of atomic minerals? These minerals have the ability to produce some nuclear activity. So there is an act which regulates the production of these minerals and export them. Previously, there was an organization called Indian Rare Earths Limited, which controlled this. So if a specific mineral is placed under this category, they cannot export. Okay. So problem is the minerals which were placed here were important for that story, that theme that is evolving. So what the government did now is pull out 6 minerals from this list and dump them in the critical minerals list. So implication here is after the amendment, any private player can now come in exploring mining. I'll tell you the difference here. Exploration plus mining. When it comes to exploration of, let's say, a huge quantity reserve, like let's say natural gas blocks, it is still viable for the government to conduct those surveys. But when it comes to rare earth, the name itself is indicating that it is rare, meaning that they are scattered all across. So these rare earth minerals are clubbed with some other minerals and it is difficult to extract them. Forget exploring. So the cost is very high and you cannot expect the government to make sure that exploration is done by them. It's not effective. This strategic reason was why the 6 minerals were pulled out from this list and placed in the critical minerals. And because of their significance, UPSC has been asking questions. For example, rutile and ilmenite. Heard these names? They are minerals of which element are we talking about? Titanium. What is the strategic use of titanium? Many uses. From sunscreen till submarine, titanium has multifold uses. From cosmetic industry till space, defense, multi-sectoral utility is there for titanium. Similarly, there is another rare earth called tantalum. Recently, on the banks of river Sutlej, you will find tantalum. Researchers found tantalum. Basically, what is tantal? Like it is a Greek word, a mythological story of Greece. So says that there is one legend, tantalum, who is known for very strong arms and body. Tantalum has displayed enormous strength, which is what gave its name. Secondly, it is used in defense sector and aerospace sector. Now, let me ask you a question. If you find tantalum on the, what do I say, like the river banks, what does it mean? Basically, it is washed away from Himalayas, or you expect alluvial soil, nothing else, right? But in that place, people found tantalum. It's quite possible now people will go hunting in river banks for tantalum. Of course, you can't allow that because it will lead to environmental degradation, which makes it necessary to have a regulation again. Other critical minerals like lithium, cobalt, etc., where we do not have enough reserves in our country. When we were discussing in the previous classes of our current affairs, we were discussing the presence of lithium, both in Kashmir as well as in Mandya district of Karnataka. Remember that discussion? If not, please go back and check once again. All these critical minerals are important in our energy transition story. So UPSC can ask as assertion reasoning based questions in economics, mines and minerals in geography, environmental impact in environment, and overall a mix of all these categories in governance through this Amendment Act. I'll give you a question. Critical minerals are a part of concurrent list, state list. Are they major or minor? Why? Exactly. Anything that has got a national significance will obviously become a part of major minerals. So basically, they're completely now under the union list because you can't afford to have federal tensions in these important areas. Now, coming back to the next category, namely beach sand minerals. It's a list of 7 important minerals. Out of them, the most important one being monazite. Okay, monazite is the mineral. You will find huge reserves of monazite in Kerala. All along the coast, you will find this reserves. Now, a quick fun fact. What is the length of Indian coastline? How many of you think it's 7,500? Recently, there is an upgrade. With this recent upgrade, you will notice that the Indian coastline length is 11,089 or something, 11,000 odd. Survey of India recalculated the landforms and the area surrounding them and included them in the part of the definition. That's why which led to the increase in our coastline. Okay. So this makes us even more careful. We have to be even more careful in conserving our coastlines. This category of mines and mineral based question can become important. Even polymetallic nodules, polymetallic sulfides, you can add all of them here. Don't go back to that bauxite, aluminium reserves. It's unlikely that they'll ask questions on those. This is the new trend. So know the basics on this. Where you are going to get the major, mines. In China, there is a place called Bayanobo. Sorry. This mine is the largest source of your critical minerals. You can get a question on this. All these facts can be important. Now, external sector and basically all the international relations are reshaped by this narrative on critical minerals. If you get access to this, you're basically going to be extremely rich. China has a literal monopoly on these minerals. There is one more place. Those are all known places. There is one more unexplored place worth $300 billion. Afghanistan. Africa, Afghanistan, China, South America, Australia. These are the hubs. Okay. Apart from this, China will deal about those respective commodities in some other chapter. Otherwise, it will become lengthy. Anyway, so these are the points that you have to remember. Coming back, note down these reasons. Apart from this, I want you to focus on this concepts: nearshoring, friendshoring, and trade concentration. Nearshoring means companies are trying to diversify or reduce their risk by moving to nearby places. That is nearshoring. Friendshoring means you are moving to a geopolitical ally. It has got nothing to do with the fact that it is just next to you. Let's say, for example, India considers US to be a friendshoring destination. It doesn't necessarily mean Pakistan is our friendshoring partner just because it is right beside us. So, nearshoring, friendshoring, and third one is trade concentration. So, these metrics are used to understand the impact of how spatially companies are spread. In that context, the definition of these terms is important. I don't want you to go into the detailed analysis, at least for prelims, it's not important. Now, when it comes to global trade performance, you will have to see Global Trade Policy Activity Index. Please note this down. Okay. There is a growing tendency to use trade policy for broader objectives such as environmental sustainability, industrial policy, national security. Basically, they're saying we will blackmail you. That's what it is, right? Very subtle way of saying if you don't agree to what we have to say, we will blackmail you in the name of environmental sustainability, industrial policy, and national security. A classic example for this is, can you give me an example? CBAM. Carbon Border Adjustment Mechanism. We dealt with this topic multiple times. I'm not going to repeat it here. Going forward. What else should you know in this? Yeah. This subheading will be very important. Trends in India's trade performance. What are our imports? What are our exports? One table will be enough. Don't go into the depth of analysis, at least for your prelims. What is the table? Let me show you. Yeah, take a look at this. Trade performance in PLI sectors. This is a very important theme. Apart from this, I'll show you one more table. Yeah, this table. This table is the most important one in this year's economic survey. Why? I'll tell you why. Because traditionally, we all know what are the main imports and exports. But in the present context, what is important to note is the new destinations for this imports and exports. For example, take a look at this. What are the alternative destinations for India's exports? Let's say Trump imposed 100%, 200% tariff. Do you think US citizens will buy from India? Obviously, they can't afford it. Next, for gems and jewelry, UAE is the sector. Hong Kong is second. You have to remember this important. Very, very important. Take a look at this. Share of UAE and Hong Kong increased to 53.6% from 41.4%. Two places, half of it. Is there any strategic significance for these places? Something else. These are the places where you will see like say for example, the proximity to Dubai and Shanghai, Hong Kong, Shanghai, Dubai, Mumbai, these are the places for global corporate entities to conduct business because of the ability to carry out arbitration cases. Let's say for example, any problem is there between two companies. These hubs are actually very important. These are like the nodal points in global trade negotiations. Shanghai, Hong Kong, Dubai, Mumbai, and let's say Washington, Geneva. These places hold a lot of significance. And trade is routed through them for tax reasons sometimes. Just remember that much. I won't go into the details now. One more thing. For pearls, precious and semi-precious stones, Canada, Mexico, China. Take a look at this. Exports from this sector are continuing to benefit from the India-UAE Comprehensive Economic Partnership Agreement, and it is anticipated that exports to UK will increase after FTA. Okay, please remember that. Traditionally, second area, marine products. US, we saw a decrease because of tariffs. In world, this is the reason. What are the other areas we are sending? Vietnam, Malaysia. Not important to remember. The takeaway here is we were able to diversify. Previously, we were putting all our eggs in a single basket. Now we are able to diversify. To say this, there is one more metric. Diversity index. India, after China and one more country, UK or UAE, there are some statistics. You can go back and verify. Third highest diversity in terms of export markets India has. We always say we have to diversify, right? Like economic survey saying, cumulatively, India is the third most diverse trading partner for the world. Okay. Auto component parts, US has been replaced with UAE. So you will have to notice one trend. Wherever we were able to have FTAs, there we are improving our trade performance. So in the same lines, UK FTA, which has been stuck since 2004 if I'm not wrong, when that is passed, you will see exports increasing drastically even in that region. Okay, next up is textiles and allied products. Here, actually Bangladesh is doing better than us when it comes to textiles. So that is the important trend that you have to notice. That's all. Pharma products. If I have to say, if there is one sector that has grown monumentally in this last 2 decades, it is the pharma sector. For example, in 2001, if the trade was roughly around $1 billion, today there is a 16x increase in pharma sector. India is now considered a hub of generic medicines. But again, just like in every other sector where we are talking about the global value chain, we are still stuck at the lower end of the spectrum. Whatever high value products are there, those are snatched away by some other market players. So we will have to increase our investments in R&D, the basic land, labor, capital enterprise. In a product like pharma, R&D becomes more important. Bulk drugs or APIs. Manufacturing APIs, R&D, these two will increase the share of pharma in the world. India's share of pharma products in the world. That is what the survey is saying. In fact, if you see, there is a decrease because of tariffs. One more thing, paper products. This is the sector that took the largest hit. The diversification to other countries has not been sufficient to offset the overall drop in exports. Why do you think US needs so much paper? Because they were still using the paper commodity. Toilet paper is a very large, that's a very large market. So for paper, they were depending on India. But for books, publication and printing, you will see African countries. One area you have to remember. Wherever you are witnessing growth rates above 7%, in those countries you can observe a pattern. There is demand for books. There is a zeal for learning something new. In fact, some economists say that this can be an African century. In the age of AI, you basically require a completely new orientation for education. The hitherto uneducated communities will find it easy to adapt and learn in the present times using AI. But the problem is, recently there was an AI summit. You know what was discussed on the sidelines of that AI summit? 85% of the world does not have access to AI. They have never used AI. And again, AI was never used even within the rich countries, OECD countries, by people above the age of 35 to 55. Like in this age bracket, they use it very less compared to Gen Z crowd. In fact, compared to Gen Z crowd, even younger kids are using more. Adoption rate is high in Gen Z and people who are Gen Alpha, people who are born after 2009-10. Very young kids. So the impact of AI, you are yet to see. Anyway, that's one more point that I wanted to show. Any other trends that you have to remember? Okay, that's it when it comes to trade. You have one more component, FDI, FPI, which we have already discussed majorly. I will club it with another topic some other time because time is not sufficient now. That's it for the day. Thank you.